to Scrapbooking Made Simple. Today we are going to use our gel plate with alcohol inks. So you'll need your gel plate, whatever size you have will work. And you'll need some alcohol inks and some acrylic paint, just a light colour, some book text, printer paper, music paper, whatever you have. So we're going to add some acrylic paint to our plate first up. Roll that out with your brayer and then place some paper over the top and pull that print. It's a very simple and basic print first up. Pop that to the side and then using the brayer rolling the rest of the the paint that is on there, and then adding your alcohol ink just in lots and lots of drops. The fun part, the paint on the gel plate acts like a top coat like on your alcohol ink paper, so the alcohol inks move not a huge lot, but they will move and feather out, which is a really fun look. So continue using as many colours as you like, or you can go a specific set of colours depending on what your photos present. I went for a rainbow of colours, used everything in the pinks and the yellows, orange, blues, purples and greens, and just filled the plate in as much as I could. Once I was happy with the design and added all the inks that I wanted to, I am going to use the piece of paper that I have just pulled the paint print up on and pull up that ink. So you can see that it is quite wet and it will soak through the paper, and that is okay. So picking up that print and then setting that aside to dry. And then what is left, grabbing another piece of paper and pulling that print up as well. Now this is all we're going to need for your layout, but if you want to continue the process, stop the video now, pause it, and continue making some prints. So I'm going to pull out this ghost print here to clean off my plate, but have some fun, play around with some different colours and play around with the technique until you're happy and you've got the prints that you need for your layout. As it had dried on the plate, just adding a little bit more paint over the top to pick up what is left on the gel plate. This ends up being a really cool effect as you're pulling up what's left on the gel plate. So very faint, but pretty nonetheless. So popping our gel plates aside, we can dry off our first print that we did, because it will still, the alcohol ink on top will still be a little wet, and you can just use a heat tool for this because you're not using the synthetic paper, which you could pull up a print on that if you wanted to, but you'll be able to just use a heat tool to dry that off. So this one is going to be the background that we're going to cut our strips up on our layout, because these are the brightest colours, this is the brightest print. It's just a fun, different way of using the alcohol inks. Something I happened upon as I was doing this. So dry that off and we will get into making our layout. When you have finished drying your background, Grab a ruler and tear off any edges that do not have any colour on them. Because I've used this old music sheet, I have quite a bit of it around the edges, but if you're using just an A4 printer paper and an 8x10 gel plate, you may not have much spare around the edge, and that is okay. So whatever size you end up working with, as long as it's under your 12 inches for your layout, we're going to tear 1/2 inch pieces of this print. So I've lined those up on my craft mat, line the ruler up to the 1/2 inch mark, and they're not always perfect, so don't stress too much about getting it spot on. Just go through along the paper and tearing off at 1/2 inch. If you've got a tearing ruler, you might like to use that, and you'll get some more jaggedy edges. I was just wanting something that wasn't too showy with the tear, but wasn't a straight cut either. So this is why I went with this technique. Something just a little different and something to use what we have at home. So hopefully you all have a ruler available to you so that you can do this technique. So it doesn't take too long. It depends on how pedantic you are. I did get a little caught up in the measurements in trying to get 1/2 inch, but some of them ended up a little wonky, and that's okay because that'll just add to the charm of the page. So I didn't end up measuring the height of what my paper ended up being, but it's similar size to an 8x10, which is the size of my gel plate, which would make sense. Um, that's what, but whatever size you end up using is fine because you might have a 9x12 plate and you might be able to use an entire A4 piece and have it coloured. Or you may have a 5x7 plate and need to do a couple of prints to get the full coverage of the paper. Whatever you have will work for this. So once you have torn up all of your strips, you're going to grab some white cardstock and then layering the strips on the cardstock. So I chose to do uneven levels, one up high, one down low, and each time doing them at different levels so they weren't all at the same height in each way. But if you prefer a uniform look, go for that. If you like the design that I have done, then work with that. It's completely up to you. So just keep working and layering your strips out until you are happy with them. I think I ended up using 17 on this one. On another one that I did, I think I used a few more. So it really just depends on what you end up with and what you are happy using. So just grabbing your glue bottle. I found it easier to work with glue because you had that little time to move it around. But if you've got a tape gun or double-sided tape, you feel free to use that. Just whatever you prefer to work with. So placing that strip on, and what we're going to do is leave a gap in between. So the gap in between, I could say, is about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. I really did not pay attention to my gaps, so they're all slightly different. So I think it's about 1/4 of an inch gap in there that I tried to give it. Some are a bit smaller, more leaning towards 1/8 of an inch in between, but again, it's personal preference. So have fun sticking all of those down, and then we will move to our next part. Once you have finished sticking all of your strips onto the background layout, we are going to cut our photo mats. Now I've cut one mat from black cardstock and then one mat from the other print that we pulled from our gel plate. So setting our layout aside, we will need a paper trimmer and some black cardstock. So cutting the black cardstock at 6.5 inches by 4.5 inches and cutting two of those. And then cutting down our print, just cutting off the edges that don't have any colour on them, and then cutting those to 6.25 inches by 4.25 inches. Now you may want to do just one, you might want to do smaller ones to have more photos on the page. It is completely up to you, so do what's going to work for your photos. So I've layered mine over the top of each other slightly, and then stuck that down with a double-sided tape. So I decided to also make a title box. So cutting the leftover piece from the print and cutting off some black cardstock. Now this is going to change the sizing wise, so I have left the size off the instructions for this one because you may or may not want to use the title box. It is completely up to you if you want to use this or not. So my idea was that I would write using a paint pen onto the print and have the title there. Or you could use a die cut or a stamp, or you may just want to use pre-cut ephemera and not have the title box on at all. So just deciding what is going to work for you. So with the double-sided tape on the gel print paper and sticking that on to the black cardstock. And then I do a little trick with sticking down the black cardstock. So this one underneath, I'm going to stick down as normal, ready for a photo. But the top one, we're not going to stick down all the way. So you will see that in the instructions, there's a little white piece of backing paper hanging out in the middle of the layout. It's not going to stay there forever. It is just there until we stick down a photo. So sticking that first photo mat down onto the layout and then adding some double-sided tape onto the other photo mat. Now this is where one side you'll pull up all of the release paper, the backing paper, and then on the other side you're only going to pull it off at the top, so it adheres onto the back of the layout, but it doesn't adhere over the top of the other box, so it's ready to peel off once you've added your photo. So the last thing to add is the title box. If you are using this, you may not want to. Once that is adhered down to your layout, you could add any embellishments that you want if you wanted to, and then adding your photos. It's a fun, simple layout, but a way to get our gel plates out and a different way to use our alcohol inks than we have in the past. Sticking the title box on, and your layout is complete. So this is one that I did earlier called Mess Makers with Owen and Jasmine when they were toddlers. Good fun. We hope you have enjoyed this class and we look forward to seeing you next time.